You don't want to have a culture of blaming, or that's not my job description, or that's this person's fault. Even though it may be that person's fault in the short term, we want to think about what we can do with process and what we can do with training and how we can make the situation better. Okay, so, as we grow, there's a tendency in an organization. It doesn't matter if you're a 10,000 person corporation or a 2-person lemonade stand. There are politics in every organization. There are little personality traits. This person doesn't like me. This has it out for me. It is just an inevitable situation that there are politics in organizations. And to combat politics, because we are not an organization that should be driven by politics, we try to run a meritocracy. Right? So the more you can create metrics, hold your people accountable to metrics, create a level playing field, the more you can run your business like a meritocracy, the less the politics will matter. There will always be some level of politics, and somebody's a good friend with this person and they got an unfair good shake or something like that will always exist. But the way that you combat that is through running a meritocracy and really promoting based on merit, and running your business based on metrics.
Yeah, we're doing everything we can to foster a culture and an environment where your performance is going to get you to the next level, not your tenure. So I think there are a lot of people that are doing some really innovative or good things that have been here only a couple of years. There's the reason why you're here. And so if it was just strictly about tenure, I wouldn't be sitting up here today either. So I truly, firmly believe, and hopefully each and every one of you believe that it doesn't really matter the tenure. Obviously, you have to respect your leaders and understand why they're there. That's all important. That's not what I'm talking about. But really trying to figure out, okay, this person, they have high potential. It's your job to identify them. It's your job to be able to kind of help and cultivate them or figure out how to get the most out of them. Because without the next levels and the next levels and the next levels, we're not going to be able to innovate in the way and be able to build and scale where we need to be to become a $2 billion company.
Next slide. This is a really messy office, but where's Joe Campbell? Is that your seat there? That was your seat? Yeah, so Joe and I and Marina, like 5 of us shared an office for a long time, and I like working in an environment like that, and especially with Joe and people like Joe at the time. But also the benefit of transparency is you don't really want to be a closed-door manager. Right? If any of you guys are closed-door managers, I would encourage you to get out with your teams, right? Because in the absence of, and this is a little bit for Management 101, but we'll do it now, but in the absence of information or actually seeing what managers do, people assume the worst. If you're a closed-door manager that just, delegates everything and goes behind your door and nobody knows what you're doing, that's not good. And we're more distributed today, but in some sense, the more you should think about this, the more transparency you can have with your work and your actions, the better leader you're going to be. So this excellence reflex, this is the not my job description point, right? We want people to have an excellent reflex. You see something going wrong in another division, you don't just accept it. You figure out you don't want to stab somebody in the back or do something crazy, but trying to point out that there's a problem that you see and not really letting the problem fester. That's what we want to develop. We want people to have an excellence reflex, right? When hotels train people, they train people that if you see a piece of paper on the floor of the hotel, you pick it up, or whatever it is, and they probably do that at this hotel. But we want to have an excellence reflex, and that's not to say that you're not respectful, you're not finger pointing, but a culture where we can point out problems and where we're not satisfied to have problems just continue to exist.
Related, a second point up there about an organizational problem being too small to care about is the concept of continuous improvement. And I think every one of you should kind of always keep that in mind, that every time you can improve something even a little bit, over time it aggregates into substantial change. And so you don't need to have a big bang when you make a change, but if you improve things slowly and consistently, there'll be huge improvement over time.
I've said this before, I'll say it again. That's not in my job description. It's your fault. Like when you look at teams that aren't winning, for another U.S. sports analogy, this one looks like baseball up here, is not winning teams are blaming each other. Winning teams are taking care of their responsibilities and then trying to improve other people and not blaming other people. So, of course, it sounds obvious, but it's extremely important. You don't want to have a culture. You don't want to have a culture of blaming, or that's not my job description, or that's this person's fault. Even though it may be that person's fault in the short term, we want to think about what we can do with process and what we can do with training and how we can make the situation better.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize this point. I think we talk about it at every conference. There are natural tension points. We're probably going to talk about that by design. However, we are all on the same team with all the same goal of making TransPerfect the best company it can be. So whenever there are going to be issues where humans make mistakes, there are going to be times when you make a mistake and then it impacts another group and vice versa. So just all know, constantly think about if you get upset and you're trying to, when was the last time you saw a team that won a championship or that is team that, or a business that's at the top of its game, just constantly pointing fingers as to why we're not as good as we should be. So
What is our job as managers? Our job, next slide, please. Our job is to help people connect the dots, right, into why what they're doing something that seems like a task basis, why what they're doing is important. All right, there's a story from a former American president, John F. Kennedy, back in the 60s when the United States was racing Russia to get to the moon. And the story is that President Kennedy goes down to NASA, and he's walking the floors of NASA, the space laboratories in Houston, and he sees a janitor, and Kennedy goes to the janitor, what do you do here? And the guy's like, well, I mop the floors. And Kennedy goes to the janitor, he says, no, you don't mop the floors, you're helping put a man on the moon. And, nobody here is a janitor, and that's not the point of the story. But the point of the story is it's our jobs as managers and leaders and future leaders to help people understand and help them connect the dots, and to understand how their small contributions every day are important and add up to something that's much larger than themselves and larger than what they see on a daily basis. So I think there's a really important lesson there, and I think that's it's very important just to remember. It's a manager's job to help someone connect the dots. How they should understand how their success on day-to-day things that are in their world affects the whole.